welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada and Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south. In the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful April the 9th, 2021, Ronald Deportes. Bonjour, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, it's a beautiful day down here. You got all the azaleas blooming down in Augusta and everything. They're trying to get the tournament over before all the cicada bugs come out. Once again, I'd like to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, and first responders. Don't let anything bug you. They'll take care of you.
Don't let anything bug you. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. And also all around the world, say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic. He'll do his things from 3,000 miles away, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. It's great to have a smart TV. You'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Man, I love pausing. Golf is something else, Big C. Not exciting as it is when it has a lot more people, but it's exciting nonetheless. I will never pause on our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why should everybody care?
Well, Charlton, everybody should think about how exciting things are, but our veterans also, they need to think about them. We lose over 24 a day to suicide in this country. And those veterans went out, Charlton, and served this country admirably. And yet this country has not returned the same favor to them. You know, that number, when we think about losing that many American lives every day, Charlton, for no apparent reason other than that they get lack of attention. We need to think about them suffering mentally, physically, and financially. Because when they served this country, Charlton, they didn't ask about what this country was going to do for them. But this country should have thought about how they were going to protect them once they came back into the civilian world.
Yeah.
We give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton. It's not enough. We as a country need to do more to protect those great men and women who serve so admirably.
Very well said. I love doing our part. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Or if you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. And you can definitely get some help for our veterans and their loved ones. Also very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants and the Say Hey Kid, as well as the home run king Barry Bonds. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 10,000 real estate agents and brokers all over this great country to help put people back to work, just like McDonald's does it. Car dealerships do it, sports teams do it. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to BigCSports.pacwm.com. Most of our loans are underwritten by Rocket Mortgage, the #1 lender in the country on the wholesale side. I also want to say thank you to Xfinity, Comcast TV, and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up from all over the world, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. So Big C, it is a happy Friday. A lot of people say it's happy. Some people say it's just a hot Friday. I mean, it's hot as blankety blank here in California, Big C, but I was noticing some of the clouds down at Augusta, Georgia. It's a little overcast, and there should be a lot of good golf coming up this weekend, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, they're hoping to avoid the rain down there because that would soften up the greens. And You like the fast greens when you're playing golf. You hate for the ball to stick when it lands there. But it's been challenging thus far when you look at the competitive nature. I've seen Jordan Spieth before the tournament started, and he's moved up into third place after that horrendous opening round.
Yeah.
But we still got 2 rounds to go. Tomorrow's going to be moving day come Saturday, and we're going to see who moves up the leaderboard and who falters. Justin Rose is still in the lead.
Yeah, he's still in the lead, Big C. It's something about that great golf course, even if it rains, and I hope it doesn't rain, but even if it rains, we know we're going to see some good golf. Some of the bigger names have been somewhat absent. Of course, Tiger Woods is out getting back on the men. Big C. Mickelson way down on the leaderboard. Justin Rose -7, finished -7 today. And then tied for second is Brian Harman at -6. Will Zalatoris, Big C, at -6. And then Mark Leishman at -5. Spieth actually tied for fourth at -5. He just finished winning the Texas Open. So is he now the makeshift crowd favorite, if that makes sense, if he can replace Johnson? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, no, he's not a makeshift crowd favorite, Charlton. He has won the Masters before, so he's been down that green fairway, so he understands what it takes to win the game. I mean, as we look at golf evolve over the years and decades, Charlton, it always changes the landscape.
Yeah.
You got to realize Tiger Woods was out of the mainstream of golf for 5 years. He was a non-factor. Now he's not in there again.
Yeah.
Golf will always move on. I mean, you reminisce about people who made you feel good at times, but that's what happens when you break up in relationships.
Yeah, sometimes you swipe left and swipe right, and it's all fair level war, Big C. And then I look at a guy like Tony Finau. I've always pulled for Tony Finau. He's -4, and he's tied for 6. There's a lot of guys tied for 6 logjam. Justin Thomas is -4. And you also have Siwoo Kim that's -4. Cameron Champ, he's a good old boy that's -4, Big C. He's also looking to make a name for himself in the world of golf, Big C. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's a wide open tournament when you came in this year, Charlton. You're always going to have favorites that are on the leaderboards. I mean, when you think about guys who've been out on the circuit for over 15 years and that 20-year ranking, they're not going to be able to compete consistently with these young guys, Charlton, because the game has evolved so much. There's always a lot of hype about a guy named Bryson DeChambeau.
Yeah.
But all good golfers know you drive for show and you putt for dough, and he has not been able to do that consistently. I think he was 4 under today, but he was like 7 under on the first day.
Yeah, he finished tied for 17. He's -1. He improved a little bit. Sometimes you look at golfers, and compared to football players, you got to lift a lot of weights playing football. Even basketball players are lifting a lot of weights. Most golfers are somewhat skinny. Bryson DeChambeau, Big C, he's out of California, grew up in the Central Valley. He's more like a football player's body. You think that goes against him? He tries to swing the club like he's hitting a baseball, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, steroids might not be the best thing for golf, Charlton. I mean, you can drive the ball long. I mean, everybody, likes to play the long ball, but that's in baseball. In golf, you got to be able to play with your irons. You got to be able to place the ball strategically. And driving it long, you're not always going to do that. You can shorten up some courses, Charlton.
Yeah.
But you need to have wide fairways.
Got to have some wide fairways. Phil Mickelson, I remember going back to the days where it was always Phil, it was always Tiger. They were the ones that set the whole golf universe on fire. It was, what people don't want to talk about, I do want to talk about. It was a black guy versus a white guy. One went to Stanford, the other went to Arizona State. Ironically, they were both from the West Coast, Big C, Pac-12, if that makes sense to you, Pac-10 back in the day. But those two, at the same time, we need someone to push for that black versus white, that East Coast versus West Coast, that old versus young, and we really haven't had that. I know sometimes golfers don't want to talk about that, but in quiet they do, Big C, because it really pulled the world along when we had Phil Mickelson, who's +3 today, and we had Tiger Woods, who just won the Masters 2 years ago, Big C. We don't have that right now, and golf's supposed to be a gentleman's sport, but it hasn't always treated everybody like gentlemen should, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the modern-day golfer, Charlton, it's a thing called equality. It's like what you see in college basketball, that it's even across the board. It's really difficult to find a dominant individual. I mean, every era has somebody. You had Arnold Palmer, you had Jack Nicholson. Those guys were dominant people in their era, Charlton. So when you look at where Tiger and Phil were, they were dominant in their era. But the eras have moved beyond those guys. I mean, people, when they think about those two guys, think about the memories that they brought.
Yeah.
You know, and that you thought about and you think of. But they're no longer going to be the best competitors on a golf course at any point in their life. They might raise up and play 1 or 2 rounds decently, Charlton, but they can never go out and dominate the 4 rounds again like they did 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, there's a guy by the name of Brooks Koepka. When I think about Bryson DeChambeau, he's tied for 61st at +5, Big C. I remember Brooks Koepka. He was like Tiger in a sense over the last couple of years. He would get so locked in, and he was always finishing right around the top 5 on golf tournaments on the majors, Big C. But he's also let his game slip a little bit, and maybe it's because of COVID. Maybe it's because a lot of guys are out of the routine, but you can't always win. What happened to Brooks Koepka becoming that next household name that was also a quote-unquote weightlifter, Big C, as you call him?
Well, you know, he really wasn't on that crescendo. You want to look at people who people thought about. That was Dustin Johnson.
Yeah.
That was Jordan Spieth. They were looked at to carry the next wave of great boxers, Charlton. I mean, Jordan Spieth won a tournament where he had gone into a hiatus.
Yeah.
Dustin Johnson won the Masters last year. We've always looked at Justin Rose of possibly being there, Ryan Day.
Yeah.
You know, these guys have risen up at various times. Like I said, the consistency, because of the competitiveness, that's where people lose focus.
Yeah.
Is that the playing surface is so equal out there now. I mean, I think about, I'm trying to think of the kid's name, that's Ricky Fowler.
Yeah.
Ricky Fowler has always been hyped up to be one of the next great golfers. He just cannot win a tournament.
Yeah.
Look at Rory McIlroy. He's won a few, but he has just not been consistent.
Yeah, the great Rory McIlroy, he's tied for 67th. He's +6. He was +6 at the last time I checked the leaderboard. He may have climbed another spot since then, but he's also a person that they were ready to embrace him as the guy that was going to carry the mantle for golf the way Tiger and the way Phil did, Big C. I'm not saying anyone's going to ever beat the great Jack now that Tiger Woods is on the mend, but what in the world happened to that good old boy McIlroy when the world was trying to crown him as the #1 golfer in the world, and then he took the back roads, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, he ended up getting together with the wrong girlfriend, Charlton, and he lost his leg.
Yeah. I thought only boxers could lose their legs. They didn't say golfers could lose their legs. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you have to walk the course instead of riding around in a cart, you just don't have the stamina that you want there.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to keep the legs fresh. This is all fair level war. I hope we have a great Masters weekend coming up on Saturday and Sunday, and it'd be nice just to see a different champion. And maybe, you know, it's rarely the guy that goes in the leaderboard on Friday that's going to win it. I mean, it's kind of back and forth, but looking forward to some good golf over the weekend. And hopefully, the weather holds up and doesn't hurt anybody on the back nine, if that makes sense to you. Big C, I want to touch a little bit on this game of golf. I've been going out to the driving range a lot over the weekend just to drive the ball, and it's been crowded lately. I still wear my mask. I still do the social distance. There are people out there saying, hey, COVID's over because it's hot outside, and they're going out and hitting the golf clubs and having a great time. But we think about this Masters, and we talked the other day how the Masters, they acknowledged Lee Elder, Big C. I think he broke the scene, allowed to break the scene off the tee, the first tee, Big C, I believe 1975, that he was allowed to participate, as they call the Masters, breaking the color barrier. And I know I don't want to sound like a macabre, but I feel the man, when he was in the prime of his life, had a lot more to offer the world of golf. In fact, had a lot more to offer the golf universe than coming down the back nine of his life, if that makes sense to you. He's an older man, a statesman, but you can see he doesn't have the spry health that a lot of us have when we're younger, Big C, in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. And now, I feel, again, I don't want to be macabre, but I'm just going to speak my mind. I feel it's a bit disingenuous to let the man get to the point where he's no longer a sprite and comes out into the golf world, and the golf world says, hey, everything's okay now because we're trying to right or wrong. To me, it's like a slap on the face, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is what white society has always done. I mean, they want to celebrate black people when they're no longer a challenge to them. You think about black leaders in America. when they were alive, Charlton, they were never celebrated, but when they were killed, you put a road with their name on it, and then you want to celebrate what they were trying to accomplish in life. Same with Lee Elder as a golfer.
Yeah.
The whole time when this man could beat you on the course with a stick and a ball, Charlton,
Yeah.
you never let him participate.
Yep.
And now that he can no longer even hardly walk around, you want to celebrate his greatness and how good he was.
Yeah.
It's a half-handed, appreciation for the man, Charlton. I mean, white society could have written it wrong when the man had an opportunity to compete.
Yeah.
And yet they failed to do that because they fear black men.
Yeah, and to me, so again, congratulations, Lee Elder. I'm sure he appreciates what had been pushed away from him for so many decades of his life. But I just think it's to me, I just didn't like the look of it. It just didn't make, especially when you had Jack up there and obviously the road, I guess you could say the red carpet or the green carpet has been laid down for Jack all of his life in the golf world. I'm not saying he could have done more. Maybe he could have. But at the same time, to me, it's just a shame. But I don't know what to say about that. Just my opinion. But
Jack Nicklaus did not make the rules at the golf courses
Right.
and the golf clubs.
Right.
The same people that made the rules 50 years ago make them today.
Yeah.
Augusta's the same. It's still a racial divided golf club, Charlton, and so he was not going to be able to play down there because of racism and segregation in America, as well as on many other golf clubs around America, whether it was in California, whether it was in New York, whether it was in Georgia.
Yeah.
There were white-only golf clubs, Charlton, segregated. They did not allow black people to be on there. So people want to do themselves saying, well, okay, we feel good about the rights the wrongs that we did decades ago, and we're going to pay a posthumous congratulatory to somebody now when they cannot really appreciate, Charlton, when all they wanted to do is compete. It's like I say all the time. White people should be happy that all we want is equality and not revenge.
Yeah, and again, it's good versus evil, and that comes in all skin colors, but I just feel that the good people of golf could have done more to fight that evil that they're trying to plot now.
Evidently, there was nobody good in golf because they were all shoulder to shoulder playing the game with him locked outside the court.
Yep, locked outside the court, Big C. But I want to look at something because we have Cameron Champ now, and he's a biracial man, and he's up there. He made a statement about the golf trying to be more inclusive. Of course, all of life people want to be more inclusive, Big C. But I want to go back to how the golf universe is played all over the world, Big C. But every time you watch someone tee off on the first green, and they say how far someone can drive the ball down the fairway, Big C, a black man who lived in Boston, Massachusetts, named Dr. George F. Grant, was born in 1846. He created the golf tee in 1899. He lived until 1910, Big C. And now we talk about today, all over the world, Tiger Woods is probably the most recognizable golfer, if not athlete, in the universe. Would you agree with that, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I would say he's the most recognizable golfer in the universe. I wouldn't say he's the most recognizable athlete in the universe, Charlton. Athletes that you see on television where their face is constantly pounded across the screen are the most recognizable.
Yeah.
LeBron James, there's nobody more recognizable in the universe than him.
Yeah.
And so Tiger would be probably in the top 5, but he would not be the elite.
Yeah, well, everybody has their own opinion, but I want to bring this up because every single golf tournament, Big C, and especially what they've done to Lee Elder, to me, and I don't want to sound cynical, but maybe I am a cynical person, I think it's a slap in the face. That's just my opinion. And nobody knows about, who started golf, but everybody knows the people that play it now. From all walks of life, every corner of the globe come men and women who play the game. From 6 courses in Botswana, I think there's 1,100 golfers, to Japan has 12 million, Big C. The United States, about 25 or more million golfers. Again, I've been going out on the golf range almost every weekend. No one's counted my name to see if I love the game of golf or not. But you have from New Zealand to the Caribbean to Mexico, Hawaii, of course in Korea, Big C, and of course the United States. But just like the acknowledgement of Lee Elder, nowhere has the game been played with more determination, Big C, and under more imposing odds than with the African-American population in the United States that's fought every single war that we've had. African-Americans were assumed to be caddies for their counterparts, Big C, in the South. In the days of slavery, they took up the game in large numbers. in the early 1900s. And whether people acknowledge that or not, it's still the golf tee that was created by George F. Grant in 1899. And you never hear golf paying homage to that, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you don't hear golf playing homage to anything black, Charlton. They just don't do that unless you're talking about the tee box that you're hitting from.
Yeah.
But, I mean, blacks were, ostracized from golf courses in all the states across the United States, not just in the South, Charlton, on the West Coast also.
Yeah.
California, especially Los Angeles, had exclusively white clubs that blacks could only be caddies on. So it was a universal thing in the United States that black golfers were discriminated on.
Yeah, it's amazing, Big C. I just know that when we have, obviously, that moment to pay homage to African-American men, and it doesn't dawn on me that it happens to be the time that Tiger Woods missed the tournament based on his recovery, Big C. So I know, to me, again, it felt like a slap in the face, and to me it seemed like, hey, let's grab Tiger and see if we can bring him along and make the whole golf universe feel like everything is going to be fair and hunky-dory, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think that they're spending time thinking about Tiger at this tournament, Charlton. He survived his car accident, so he's alive, and that's how everybody looks at it. But life goes on even if he had not survived, Charlton. You got to continue on with what you do to make yourself better.
Very well. And so, Big C, everybody has their own opinion about it. Again, I'm a little bit cynical. I felt bad for Lee Elder. He wasn't in his best health coming out, but they did what they felt they had to do. I thought they were making fun of the man, not honoring the man. But I still want to make sure that at least on Big C Sports, we acknowledge an African-American man who lived in Boston, Massachusetts, Dr. George F. Grant, was born in 1846. He created the golf tee 1899 and lived until 1910. Today, people don't even pay attention when they tee off that is an African-American man whose lineage has been excluded from nearly every golf course until, at least in the professional and the majors, Big C, until Lee Elder, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, to sit there and worry about all the wrongs that white people have done to black people in America and feel amnesty towards that, Charlton, then we lose focus of what we need to accomplish. I mean, the history of America was built by black people. Every brick and stone, when you think about anything significant in America, it has black on it, yet blacks did not get a chance to enjoy those achievements.
Yeah.
And still today, there are many achievements that blacks do not get a chance to enjoy because of white racism.
Yeah, and we got to have the good people of all colors try to step up and stamp that out, and that's part of why I wanted to talk about that today, as opposed to just saying, hey, well, they did a great thing, honor the great Lee Elder once he's, way past his prime. It's all fair and love and war. I do want to touch a little bit on African-American history before we come up on the Big C. Pause, Big C. Black American sports history. We celebrate the accomplishments of these less known historical African-American athletes, Big C, and their aspirations that inspire us. Every pro team's Jackie Robinson. We talked about the great Lee Elder, Big C, how he was held aside and pushed aside and marginalized, but he was able to compete and maybe make a bigger name for people of color all over this country in the world of golf. Going back to September 29th, 1952, Big C, Ollie Matthews. It's Ollie Matson, actually, the Chicago Bears, and the Cubs on the city's north side are still segregated when Ollie Matson played the first game of the season for the NFL's Cardinals, the second South Side team to be integrated. That's back in 1952, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, we revel today, Charlton, on black athletes in pro football. And we think about the big paychecks and the exorbitant numbers that they put up. But they don't realize the struggle that black athletes had to go through just to integrate that league, Charlton, and how they were discriminated against even while playing.
Yeah, it's amazing because I think about the great Lee Elder whenever we talk about anyone and how dominant he was and how healthy he was as a competitor, as an athlete. They waited until he had a hard time seeing and walking to say, we want to come out and say how proud we are to honor the great Lee Elder, Big C. Ollie Matson, when you think about it, he was an American Olympic medal winning sprinter, Big C, and a professional American football running back. He played in the National Football League from 1952 to 1966. He was drafted in the NFL by the at-time Chicago Cardinals, and Matson went on to share 1952 Rookie of the Year honors with the great Hugh McElhenny, Big C, of the San Francisco 49ers back in the day. He was traded to the Los Angeles Rams for 9 players following the 1958 season. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, people thought that Herschel Walker's trade was enormous when the Dallas Cowboys and Minnesota Vikings hooked up on that trade, but it showed the dominance and power of a black player back in the 50s. You think about Ollie Matson's accomplishment.
Yeah.
He was such a dominant running back in the NFL, Charlton, that the team decided to switch him to wide receiver because he was embarrassing so many white players. You think about how bad you are as an organization, is that you take your best player out of the most dominant position that he's in because he's embarrassing white players on the other team, and you didn't want to even stand for that have him as a member of your team doing that.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of that assessment's going on with Justin Fields. They're trying to say, well, he's too big, he's too fast, he throws the ball too far, and I know he's good with the touchdown-interception ratio, but there's just something about him that maybe he doesn't make the best reel. I heard a guy come on, and he's a Hall of Famer for whatever reason, Big C, and he was trying to critique whether or not he finds the open receiver fast enough, Big C, or if he takes too long to find the open receiver. He couldn't knock his passing, his completion percentage, that's over 72%. He couldn't knock what he's done as a winner, Big C, how he's been to the championship game or the playoffs every year that he's been a starter. Couldn't knock that, but the only thing he was trying to knock is, I'm not sure if he makes his reads fast enough, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, when you're paid by somebody to knock another black guy off, and that's always been done since slavery. And so when you're sitting there and you're critiquing, and he's the only one that you want to critique, saying that he struggled, what you're trying to do is knock down his draft capital.
Yeah.
And whenever you can devalue a black man in professional sports and society, Charlton, this is what people do.
Yeah, we've seen it a lot. That's why I love just the facts, like the great Walter Cronkite, just the facts. So back to Matson, Big C. Missed the entire 1953 season while he was serving in the United States Army. During his year of service, he was named the MVP of the All-Army football team, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, we hear this so often, Charlton, in the 40s and 50s, that black athletes went into the armed services. They became veterans of our armed services in this country. Well, many white athletes chose not to do that, to go out and serve their country. And so when people say that blacks have never been a productive member of American society, we have done as much, if not more, as a culture to protect this country and sacrifice and give everything we had in success for that white people can live in peace, Charlton.
Yeah, and I feel that's why I feel, and again, maybe I'm just the only one in the universe that thinks the acknowledgement of Lee Elder, and maybe they did it because Tiger's not at the tournament this year. I felt that was just, to me, it's just like a punch in the gut. You can't do it while the man's young.
The reason why they did it because they were honoring Hank Aaron at the All-Star game this year that was going to be in Atlanta. And they were tying Lee Elder into this. They didn't do it just for Lee Elder.
Yeah.
He just happened to be residue of what they had planned for Hank Aaron in the city of Atlanta, since Augusta's only about an hour away.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it just seemed like it was a makeup. You know, you call someone for the last hour so you can get that date, because the first person you wanted the date wasn't available. But I understand they're trying to just cover up some of the sins of the past, if that makes sense to you. But I think about what Matson did in the Army, served with his military, and all these things that he did it back in Jim Crow, Big C. Before we come up on the Big C pause, Matson finished the 1957 campaign as the NFL's sixth most prolific running back, Big C, 577 yards gained in 134 carries. He averaged 4.3 yards per carry, Big C, and he also scored 6 touchdowns, and this is after he came back with the service, Big C. Your thoughts?
And he was playing with and against guys, Charlton, that did not particularly care for him as a person. These are the struggles that black athletes had to deal with in the 50s, Charlton, through racism. And to go out and try to do your job and have teammates not even supporting you.
Yeah, people talk about Jackie Robinson or Lee Elder, and then they'll have them stand next to guys who never faced discrimination, never had to deal with any type of discrimination, Big C. No one ever told them that you can't be on a golf course, and they'll bring them out and stand them next to the great Lee Elder as if they all went the same thing, like they're all brothers. We're all brothers. We all want the same thing, and we know that's not the case, and that's why it's always something that I want to bring attention to. We're going to take what's called the Big C pause. also known as the Big C Timeout. When we come back, I want to finish up more talking about the great Madison and what he had done. In the words of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll be back. All right, we are back from the Big C Pause, also known as the Big C Timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many apps, and I really do appreciate the growth we're having with Big C Sports. I also want to say thank you to Xfinity, Comcast TV, and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up from all over the world, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. And Big C, going back to Madsen, Ollie Madsen, what he had done, Big C, talking about what he did as yards per carry, 4.3 yard average after coming back serving the military. Big C, he added 20 catches for 451 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. Madsen was named the Pro Bowl 6 times during the course of his career and was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1972. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it showed the ability of black athletes in that era and every era, Charlton. All you needed was an opportunity to compete. I know you talk a lot about Lee Elder on this show. And those white athletes in those eras did not give a damn about Lee Elder. You're talking about people standing up. Think about what NBA players did last year in the bubble when it came to Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
They said, we're not going to play.
Yeah.
And they had to delay some games. So you never saw a white golfer stand up for Lee Elder and say, hey, we're not going to play this tournament unless he can play. They didn't think about him in any kind of way as a man.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm looking at, too, because I know, my father, very, very proud man, and he was actually in the Air Force, served his country in the Air Force. He was a mechanic that made sure the airplanes could fly. He had to test flight them before they put the pilots on the Big C. And just having those conversations with him about things that he was able to overcome, and he overcame them anyway. But it just reminds me when they brought Lee Elder out, there's so much pride in that man that he had to put up with so much garbage while he was healthy, and to wait until he's not spry and alert anymore to bring him out. I don't like to look at that, and I think that's part of the lineage of what golf has done, especially down at the Masters, Big C. And you're right, there hasn't been a big pushback other than saying that we want to make things better for inclusion and diversity. But outside of talk, when did you hear any golfers do anything outside of talk about inclusion and diversity, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you're paying homage to guys, Charlton, that lived their lives through racism, okay?
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. When you bring these guys up and you talk about them, they were the racists on the golf course. They at no point did they stand up like Black Lives Matter athletes, Charlton, said, we're not going to play this contest. They didn't do that.
Yeah.
They said, hey, black people are supposed to be caddies, not combatants.
Yeah, and I just see that and how the whole world has their own opinion. But again, I thought they could have done it better than bringing by somebody who was struggling to even stand up. And they're saying, hey, we want to just pay homage to the Masters with the great Lee Elder. It's all fair and level more, Big C. I want to focus on, it's a little bit different angle of how you correct things. And again, you can't please everybody. That's why I said I don't want to sound macabre, but it just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right, Big C. The Washington football team, this does make me feel right. They've hired Natalia Durantes, Big C, as its coordinator of football operations. Now, Durantes, when you think about it, Durantes is the name, proper pronunciation, making her the first Latina to fill that role in the NFL. We know the Washington Redskins, they've changed the name to Washington football team because they're trying to right a wrong that they knew was hurtful to a lot of people. And now they're doing something that not only helps a woman of color, but then they're trying to make sure she has a real position as coordinator of football operations, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you talk about inclusion and you think about civil rights movement in America, Charlton, and you think through civil rights and all of those things that have occurred, women have advanced more quickly, if you think about it, than African Americans have through that same law. Because they're getting positions that black men are not getting in professional sports. It's great that these women are integrating the sports and they, as you say, fight for equality and an opportunity. All you want is an opportunity to prove your worth in any professional sport on any level.
Yeah.
And this is something that black men have asked for forever. Just give us an opportunity. Hire us. You'll always have the ability to fire us, but just hire us.
Yeah, just for the chance to compete. And oftentimes, even in the days of Jim Crow, it was easier for African-American women to go into the workforce than black men because they were not seen as a threat. Oftentimes, they were seen as someone that maybe you could hug up against, if that makes sense to you, like a lot of men have done over the years. But when you think about Durantes, Big C, taking nothing away from her, she is going to report directly to head coach Ron Rivera and work closely across various departments, from medical to scouting to public relations and to the coaching staff, among others. And that's a good step in the right direction, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this shows the intelligence and salience of an individual, Charlton, that they qualify for the position. That's always the key.
Yeah.
Many black people have had the qualifications for positions, but it's always been told to them, we're going to go in another direction.
Yeah, we're going to go in a different direction. Now it's not the right time. Let's wait until you're old like Lee Elder, and then we'll bring you out there and have you stand next to men who've never faced discrimination, and we made them the pinnacle of the universe in that business. And I just didn't like that, Big C. But also back to what the Washington football team's done since hiring Ron Rivera, Big C, who's also Latina, in January of 2020. You know, he's overcome his issue, his health issue. Thank God for that, and thank science for that. Washington has hired the NFL's first black president, Jason Wright, Big C. We talk about men of color wanting the same opportunities as the white counterparts. The NFL's first black woman assistant coach, Jennifer King, and the first woman as part of a team's broadcast booth in Julie Donaldson. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you got to think about Washington in this light, Charlton. They were the last team in the NFL to integrate. So making these moves, I guess you would consider proper.
Yeah, you could consider proper. And the man who owned them at the time had nothing to do with what's going on now. And that's part of also why I'm also honored to just have that information for people to just Google it for themselves and they can think about it. When you think about Jennifer King as the first black woman as part of a team's broadcast booth, Big C, when you watch HBCU, college football, college basketball, it's not an anomaly to see a person of color in the broadcast booth. It's amazing that it's still taking some more time for teams in the NFL to start getting there. It's happened over the last decade and a half, but it's good to see more of it, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, that shows you how racism is still vampant in America, Charlton. When you see an HBCU game, you can only do it with black broadcasters. Why is that? Why don't you put the white broadcasters on those broadcasts and put the black broadcasters on your A games on the network?
That's very well said. Julie Donaldson, who's also served as the senior vice president of media. The team also hired a black general manager earlier this offseason in Martin Mayhew, Big C. So there's something about that Washington football team, that Washington football franchise, located in the I won't say the heart of the nation's capital. Now they're out of Virginia as opposed to downtown Washington, D.C., not that far from the White House. But they are making some strides, whether they're slow or fast, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, all organizations in professional sports are making strides, but will those strides pay off? That's the bottom line.
Yeah, well, Durantes is paying off. I hope so. Previously, Texas A&M's, the Aggies communications coordinator down in Texas for the football team, and has also worked at the NFL as a social media content creator and as a social media intern with the Cardinals. So she's climbing that ladder. Hopefully there'll be more people who climb that ladder. And what I like about what they're doing with the Washington football team, Big C, they're not waiting until people are way past their prime to bring them out and have a ceremony just to say, hey, look at us now, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you look at internal operations of a professional organization, it's different. You need people that's up on their game, that's in touch with what's going on currently, not living in the past. I mean, you know, the Washington Football Club was the last to hire a black as an employee. You think about that in the 60s, Charlton. And yet the moves they are making now seem to be more progressive.
Yep.
We'll see how they turn out and how long they stay with the organization.
Yeah, I hope it turns out fine, Big C. It has to turn out fine. Everybody, including what we do, we can all hope for the best. We can all hope that everybody has an opportunity to do whatever they can that makes life better for them and better for people that look up to them and that want to come behind them. But I want to just take a slight U-turn and ask you, I know they've made progress, and I don't think they did it with the Rooney Rule. what can other teams learn from what the Washington football team has been able to do in such a short time, Big C? Your thoughts?
You know, I mean, each team is its own entity, Charlton. It's not like they're trying to learn from each other. I mean, that'd be like saying, okay, teams that got black coaches, what did the rest of the league learn from them because those coaches have winning records? Why don't all of them hire black coaches? You can't put somebody's mindset on somebody else's business.
Yeah.
It's like saying Apple should operate like Amazon, and Amazon should operate like, Prime.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what we're looking at. These are all individual actions. You look at what happened at the Masters with Lee Elder, them paying homage to the man, 40 years, 50 years after they would not let him play in the tournament.
Yes.
So, I mean, you can't learn anything from an organization. You have to man up yourself.
Yeah, that's very well said. But I do wish the Washington football team, I want to give them a congratulations for just doing the right thing. I want to take it to the world, more women, Big C. We have University of Arizona out of the Pac-12, the NCAA basketball champion runner-up to the University of Stanford, also out of the Pac-12. Adia Barnes, Big C, joins Don Staley's staff for the USA AmeriCup. It's the Arizona women's basketball coach, and then Don Staley on the staff for 2021 for the AmeriCup to be held June 11 through 19 in Puerto Rico, Big C. The event is a qualifier for the 2022 FIBA Women's World Cup, and you have two African-American women that are in the charge of it. I think going back to when I was growing up watching the U.S. Olympic teams and teams that competed for our country, I don't recall ever seeing those teams headed by a person of color, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, what you're looking at now, Charlton, when you're putting people in charge is people who can identify with the young players. And if you have African-American coaches, you're generally going to have a predominant number of African-American athletes. And they recognize now today, Charlton, that these women can identify with the women who look like them and are going to be more willing to understand what their needs and wants are. And that's how things should be in society. There should be an equal part participation in people who look like you.
Yeah.
And until we get to that point in society, we will never have equality.
Speaking of that, and again, the great Lee Elder, congratulations, Mr. Elder. But I do think they were making fun of the man. That's just my opinion, and no one can tell me different, even if I'm wrong. I'll just have to be wrong, Big C. I look at Barnes and also Staley. When you think about the U.S. national teams, Big C, the head coaches, both took their teams to national semifinals. This is, again, they're in their prime of life, in their prime of coaching. They didn't bring them out 40 years in the future, say, hey, look, these are two women that could have had a chance. They're letting them succeed right now. The first time that two African-American coaches have advanced to the same women's Final Four. Barnes and Staley, they're the only former WNBA players to lead teams to the Final Four. And all that means is when they're given opportunity, that the great, it's all fair and love and war, but they were given the opportunity, and now they are succeeding. And I know that Lee Haney has to be happy with the success that he's seeing now, Big C, and other men of color and women of color who have been pushed aside. I'm sure that a lot of people are happy to see this, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you have to understand, Charlton, all great black athletes of the past are proud of the current black athletes and the success that they are achieving because they never, ever received the opportunity to be on that grand stage. They were discriminated against.
Yeah.
When you look at this basketball now with the women's side, Charlton, there's been many black female coaches in college basketball who have never gotten that opportunity, just like Lee Elder, Charlton.
Yeah.
Time has passed them by to get into a leadership role on a national team, Charlton. They were always overlooked. Even though they had success on the college ranks, it just wasn't a time for them. Discrimination still sits there. I think because Don Staley has been so outspoken and she's such a young, progressive woman, Charlton, and she's been a great mentor, that it was hard to turn their back on her right now, Charlton, with all of the uproar that she has created within the NCAA, going after Mark Emmert directly, making it public, is that how could they not allow her to advance in this position?
Yep, very well said. Just about Lee Elder, I think about Lee Haney, Big C. It was an American professional bodybuilder, and he shares the all-time record for most Mr. Olympia titles with 8, Big C, with Ronnie Coleman. I think about that. He's 61 years old. He was 5'11", but he was he was a champion because no one could tell him how hard he could work out. No one could tell him how disciplined he had to be at his craft. And when I think about Lee Haney and I think about Lee Elder, Haney was allowed to succeed based on his ability. Could you imagine if they were to tell Lee Haney, who has, shares the record for the most all-time Mr. Olympia titles? We talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger all the time with his role in one of his movies, I think The Terminator, I'll Be Back. But these bodybuilders, unlike Lee Elder, Big C, when in the prime of their lives, they were able to pursue their dream. And I just appreciate that more and more people are talking about it like we do, and not just to trot out someone like Lee Elder and say, hey, congratulations for putting up with all the crap we put you through, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at those bodybuilders, there was a different stage that they were on. I mean, they were individual competitors. They had a lot of cameras on them. You look at those sports that you're talking about. Those were camera-driven sports, Charlton. Bodybuilding was not. It still does not have a lot of cameras on it when it comes to competition.
Yeah.
And so when you look at those sports that white America did not want to see black athletes dominate in, when you're out there competing head-to-head against a white competitor, those were the things that they wanted to keep off of television, and they kept off of television. It was not by mistake or error, Charlton. It was intentional.
Yeah.
If you let America see that blacks were the dominant athletes, and you talked about, McElhaney, the football players, Charlton, the NFL was not a television sport in that era.
Yeah.
So it was okay. Even baseball was not a regular television sport. But once blacks integrated those sports, Charlton, they started being seen more on television.
Yeah.
And that was the fear of white people, that other white people would see blacks as being more dominant, and they could not hold that farce that they were the superior people.
Yeah, and when I hear a former football player saying that Justin Fields, he has a winning record. He has the highest completion percentage record out of all the top 4 quarterbacks they're talking about being in the draft, and has the best touchdown to interception ratio. He's been in the championship game, and he was even played the championship game with cracked ribs, Big C. And I heard a former quarterback saying, I'm not sure if he makes the decision quick enough to pass the ball or when to check it down. I mean, to me, it's like you got to find fault with every single thing, and the guys beat everybody in front of them, even the guy they want to go number 1, Big C. But it's all fair and love and war. I want to bounce the ball over to the NBA, and paying homage to the great. It's all fair and love and war. But Lee Elder, I really appreciate what he went through. I don't appreciate the way they drug him out there, not being in his best health, with guys who never faced discrimination. To me, that's not fair. That's like taking 2 kids, and one, they could be your own children. One, you give them money, you give them the best education, you give them the best food, the best everything. And the other kid, you don't even deal with them. And then you're going to have them both take a picture together and pay homage to both of them. One of them has to feel a bit stain in his stomach, Big C. To me, I just don't like what they did that at the Masters. NBA basketball, the great Jimmy Butler scored 28 points. He led the Miami Heat past the depleted Los Angeles Lakers. It was 110-104 on Thursday night. The great Victor Oladipo added 18 points. But it was a good sign for the Lakers, Big C. They were out there 2 king men, LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And they pushed their team on the road, the Miami Heat, and they even had an ejection late in the game for someone using foul words to the referee, Big C. But they only lost it by 6 points. And this is a team that's starting to make an effort even without James and Davis, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the last time I looked in the loss column, it didn't state how many points you lost the game by. But still, even without those players, how do you develop the continuity when they do come back? James most likely will be back. I'm not so sure that Davis will be back. He's always been the 10-man his entire career. He had a fortunate season last year with the Lakers, but I think the pause because of COVID helped him get through the season. So the Lakers are one of those teams that are going to struggle at the bottom part of the Western Division, and it's not to say that they're going to have much success in the playoffs this year coming up.
Oh, yeah, they'll get success in the playoffs, Big C, because I have some friends inside, and they tell me they'll get some success. It's called the whistle, if that makes any sense to you. The great Colin Sexton, Big C, dropping 27 points. The Cleveland Cavaliers ended a 5-game losing streak to the Oklahoma City Thunder, beating the Thunder 129-102 on a Thursday night. So the Lakers played a lot better effort than the Oklahoma City Thunder. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is that part of the NBA season, Charlton, where you're going to see teams that know that they don't have a chance at the playoffs trying to figure things out. They got shorthanded rosters, trades depleted their rosters. And OKC, once they've lost the core of that team, you never expected them to be competitive.
Yeah, they've kind of mailed it in. It's all fair and love. Taurean Prince scored 22 points. Darius Garland, he dropped 21. The great Kevin Love out of UCLA, Big C, 18 points, 11 rebounds for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers broke open a tight game. They have an 11-0 run, Big C, to begin the second half. If they could just start the first half and the second half the same way, Big C, they'd be a lot better team, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is one of those teams that goes as Colin Sexton goes generally, Charlton, and if he's not having a hot night, you know what you're always going to get from Kevin Love, but you need a breakout score each time for Cleveland.
Yeah, you got to have that each time for Cleveland. Here's another game that was a monumental game in the Western Conference, in my opinion. And I think about how the Masters honored the great Lee Elder and all the pride that he had to muster just to put on a smile. And it wasn't really a bright smile down at the Masters. I'm not trying to speak for the great Lee Elder, Big C, but he had to sit there thinking, these are the same people that were kicking me in my spirit, and now they want to have me stand up. And maybe he did it for whatever reasons. I guess better late than never, but it just didn't feel right in my stomach, Big C. But the great Donovan Mitchell, he was able to shine in his prime, and he dropped 37 points to lead Utah to his 23rd straight victory at home in Utah, Big C, 122-103 over the Portland Trailblazers Thursday night. And sometimes Portland, it's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde Portland lately. You don't know what you're going to get with the Trailblazers, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know you're not going to get a team that's consistent first and foremost. But this is where people need to be worried about Utah. You speak about their home record. They're going to have home court advantage in the playoffs. And then that's a huge advantage for any team in the NBA.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe they wouldn't, but the Clippers had a lot to say about that when they brought the Sun to town. But we'll talk about that. Maybe the Suns were a little bit exhausted, like Gonzaga when they went up against Baylor, all fair 11. Where the great Rudy Gobert dropped 18 points, not that impressive, but he must have been eating the same thing that the great late Wilton Stewart Chamberlain ate. Big C, he pulled in 21 rebounds. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you have to understand what Rudy Gobert's game is all about. It's about playing defense. And when you get double-digit points from Rudy Gobert, that's impressive because you're going to get the double-digit rebounds.
Yeah.
You're going to get the 2 or 3 blocks per game. But when he gives you the double digits in points, that's the impressive part about his game because he takes a lot of the workload off of the other performers on his offense, and that makes them even more potent at home.
Yeah, he's amazing when he goes after the rebound. He reminds me like a taller version of Dennis Rodman, the way Dennis Rodman was undersized but to go after rebounds with the same tenacity, Big C. Also, you think about the great Joe Ingles, dropped in 13 points. He had 6 assists. Utah dominated on the glass by outright. Think about this. If you could out-rebound a team by 17 rebounds on the same court on the same night, it was 58-41 while snapping a 2-game skid. And again, Portland, they were so primed to make that run. But maybe since McCullough came back, Big C, some of the chemistry's been a little bit off. I don't want to blame him, but it's just a fact, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you have to understand that rebounds don't make the highlight reel on the sports shows, Charlton.
Nope.
But they do win games for you. So if you're sitting there worrying about guys knocking down a 3-point shot or getting a spectacular dunk, you have to realize that rebounds were the ones that set that up.
Yep, the rebounds are the ones that set it up, and it's all fair and level. War. Box out and rebound. The Detroit Pistons, Motown, beat the Sacramento Kings 113-101 on Thursday night, Big C. And Luke Walton's under a lot of heat in the capital city because he wants that coaching job at Arizona that opened up, Big C. That's his by a figured. And the team knows that, and they've given up. There's no reason the Kings should have lost to the Detroit Pistons. Corey Joseph, Big C, had a season-high 24 points and 7 assists in the first game against his former team. But give me that thought that Walton, he's in a situation where the Kings have always been on the outside looking in, since they stopped being in the playoffs when the Maloof brothers got rid of the team, Big C, and they were taking players to Vegas for relaxation. Now, they have a great ownership group, Big C, Vivek Ranadive. But they've had so many coaches. They've gone through coaches like people go through shoes over the last 10 years, Big C. Your thoughts?
So what's really the problem with the organization is the players, Charlton, and general manager. It's not the coaches.
Yeah.
If you say the problem is consistent with the players losing, because it's been a long time since a basketball coach laced it up on the court and went out and played. Let's talk about Bill Russell. He won a championship when he was coach and player with the Boston Celtics.
That's right.
So the young guys that you have, and that's the biggest problem with the NBA. You bring all these young guys in, you make them millionaires and tell them to go out and act like grown men, Charlton. They can't.
Yeah.
When they get to the court, they're a little worn out, and you've had that consistently in Sacramento over the last decade.
Yeah, they've had it for a long time. Since the great Chris Webber and Vlade Divac were doing their thing, Doug Christie and Mike Bibby, and they were running around trying to get into the NBA Finals, and the official said, I don't know how a whistle sounds. The whistle fouled the play. Like, I'm 5 feet away from the guy. How's that a foul? Like, I think the Lakers shot 14 free throws in the fourth quarter back in the day. But then back to the Kings and also the Pistons. Isaiah Stewart had his 16 points, 13 rebounds, in place of injured Mason Plumlee, Big C, for the Pistons. Okafor, who missed 27 games following left knee surgery, Big C, scored 11 points. And then Killian Hayes also dropped in 11, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you come to these young teams in the NBA, you want to find out teams that have success. Look at teams who have guys that are married, that are family men, versus teams that have all these players that are young and single out there enjoying themselves. They don't leave it on the court at night. They leave it in the club.
Yeah, they leave it. That's very well said. I can't confirm or deny, Big C. I can't confirm or deny, but it is all fair love of war. And then down in L.A., the city of angels or the city of champions, Big C, the Los Angeles Clippers, the superstars showed that again Thursday night. The great Paul George dropped 33 points. The great Kawhi Leonard added 27 for the Clippers in a 113-103 victory over the Phoenix Suns in a physical matchup. Chris Paul didn't have his best game, but I think they turned up the lights so bright when they had the chance to take off and knock off the Jazz. They were a little bit leaking of energy last night, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it was the physicality of the Clippers in this game. I mean, this was one of those games where the refs swallowed the whistle and let the teams go out there and beat up on each other. And the Clippers had too much at home for against the Suns, Charlton. And I mean, if you'd have watched this game and saw some of the non-calls that were not made by the officials, you would understand the physicality of the game.
Yeah, I mean, the officials have a tough. They can't win or lose, Big C. There's always someone that says they did enough or not. Maybe they did too much and sometimes didn't do enough. Phoenix also did not have enough down the stretch, Big C. The great Devin Booker led the way, dropping 24 points. Mikal Bridges dropped 20. And the Suns made 27 of the first 40 shots, but they were only 9 of 13 after the hot start, Big C. Your thoughts?
And that's where the physicality came in and took over. Clippers said, hey, we can't let you get these easy shots off. They bodied them up a lot, and the officials didn't blow the whistle. Yeah,
they didn't blow the whistle. They kind of held their tongue on that. Tonight's schedule, Friday, April 9th, you have Indiana at Orlando, Minnesota's at Boston, Memphis is at the New York Knicks, Chicago's at Atlanta, Big C, Chicago is going to be at Atlanta. Philadelphia is going to be at New Orleans. That's a good matchup with Zion and also Joel Embiid. Charlotte's at Milwaukee. San Antonio's at Denver. Here's a chance for the Joker to shine. I know you like the Joker, Big C. Washington is at Golden State. And then Houston is at the L.A. Clippers. Big C, what's the game of the night for Big C in that lemonade you make down south, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, wherever the Joker's playing at, Charlton, is always going to be an outstanding performance with him. He's always on the verge of a triple-double. But I like the game down in Atlanta tonight, Charlton, with the Chicago Bulls going to Atlanta. They're playing with the City Edition uniforms again tonight, Charlton, where they're honoring the late Dr. Martin Luther King. The Hawks are 5-0 and wearing those uniforms at home to honor the late King, Charlton. Maybe they'll go 6-0 tonight.
Maybe they will, or maybe they won't. It's all fair and level. Our final story, Major League Baseball, the schedule's not a big one tonight. You have the New York Yankees at Tampa Bay. That game's already been decided. Big C. Washington at the L.A. Dodgers, the defending world champion L.A. Dodgers. Colorado Rockies at San Francisco. The Angels of Los Angeles, even though they're in Anaheim, at Toronto, Big C. You have Detroit at Cleveland. You have the Phillies at Atlanta. San Diego at Texas. And then the Governor Abbott still won't show his face, Big C. The Oakland A's at the Houston Astros. And the Cincinnati Reds at the Arizona Diamondbacks down in the desert. And I think they will have the roof closed. It's so hot, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, it's early in the baseball season. You know, we got well over 140 games yet to play this season, so it's going to be a long, hot summer. And the battles will start after we get 100 games into this season.
Yeah, a lot of good teams looking forward to Major League Baseball this year. Some of the top five, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Padres, the Twins, and the Astros are really swinging the bat. It's all fair and level world. Hopefully we will have a good Masters turnout. I still, and then again, maybe I'm the only one, don't want to sound macabre, but I don't like the way they brought out and did what they did with Lee Elder, and they had him standing. They didn't even have him stand, by himself. They had him stand with the guys who've been shown privilege and a silver spoon all their lives. I just didn't like it. It was just a punch in the stomach. But it's all fair and level where we got to rise and shine every day. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Rumble, young man, rumble. With all you've got to use, how could you lose? Big C, what are you looking forward to in this Bar's universe?
Well, Charlton, we have the GOP, the Republican Party of the United States. We're saying let's boycott all sporting events, Charlton, because black people want to have equal rights and justice when it comes to voting. And I'm for that, Charlton. Let them boycott. Let them sit their butts at home and let the blacks and the people who want to watch them play go out and play fantastic sporting events, Charlton. Once again, I'm all about thanking those frontline healthcare workers, the nurses, doctors, and first responders. They're not looking at color, Charlton. They're looking at the people that they take care of. All Americans in their eyes.
All Americans in their eyes, and you can take care of everybody in your eyes. When you look in the mirror, you can look in the mirror every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. You got to rise and shine no matter what you do. As my mom always says, there's never ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.